The average soul desiring goodness and decency today has tended to view the recent decades as a large, slippery slope which an entire culture and most in the body of Messiah are sliding quickly down. The slippery slope tends to be seen as a general moral decline. One restraint after another restraint is thrown off. Degree after degree of depravity increases. The slippery slope has seen godlessness and rebellion against Messiah's body increase, and many manners of evil increase with it. One wonders seriously if the next few years, after what we've already seen, won't just have polygamous marriages with animals involved and the whole wedding night shown shamelessly on TV. That is the slippery slope, at least our moral image of it. However, I want to point out that there is clearly another level of slope, or I'd even say another kind of cliff that we're falling off. That is not in degrees of shameless depravity. No, this is something different, and perhaps even more sinister. If we really examine where we have come from and look closely at where we are going, it seems that we cannot deny where our culture, which is still heavily influential toward the whole world, is heading. In fact, as far as our sliding down it, we're almost at full speed. First, let's look back briefly at where we came from and what our worldview is. We come from a Christian society whose worldview is in part shaped by the Bible, along with other traditions which the historical church absorbed or developed. That biblical and Christian worldview has, for most of its history, acted in conjunction with a respect for natural law. Divine revelation and natural law have been seen to go hand in hand. What that means, in the broadest of senses, is that we need to use our common sense to solve problems that special revelation never gets into. What it means more specifically is that we supplement our worldview with a respect for natural design principles and a respect for the purposes of an item. Just as we respect how a machine was meant to be used, I'd be a fool to misuse the technology I am currently writing on. We also respect how our organisms were meant to be used. We respect its design and purpose. Divine revelation itself, in Romans chapter 1 here, has no problem stating that homosexuals are going against nature in what they do. If this is true, Christians long understood, then it is true in other areas. We shouldn't disrespect how a tool or an organism is meant to be used. To do so would be theoretically ridiculous and practically dangerous. Hence, most of Christian history has enriched its understanding with a respect for nature's laws, which God himself put in place. Let us fast forward now to the slippery slope era. This is the era when Christianity in many senses has become almost unrecognizable. It is the era when immoral depravity has also been embraced by the post-Christian West. It is the slippery slope era we are speaking of. Yet instead of pointing to depravity and examining what this slippery slope is, I want to point to something else, to the abandonment of natural law, the rebellion against it. This I see beginning most clearly, not in the late 1960s, but instead in the year 1930. What happened in 1930? Was it the year that prayer was taken out of public schools? Nope. Was it the year so-called sex education began in public schools? Nope. Was it some milestone for homosexuals? Well, in an indirect way, I'd say yes, but not in any concrete way. You see, 1930 is the first time any major Christian body formally accepted the use of contraception as morally acceptable. This was the Anglican Church, which began to accept it under limited circumstances and quickly went on to accept it broadly. Nearly all Protestants and evangelicals within decades had followed suit, abandoning a prohibition against contraception which had been in the fabric of Christianity since the earliest documented eras. We can see contraception prohibited in writing as early as the Didache, and this quickly became the norm and eventually the rule everywhere. Yet within decades of 1930, nearly all major bodies of Christendom had accepted this practice as moral And even the Catholic Church, which still maintains the prohibition, only manages to lead a small minority of Catholics in respecting the prohibition and human fertility with it. You see, this is the slippery slope I am talking about. The gradual disrespect for nature, especially as it involves our own organisms. Contraception, which is in and of itself immoral, is a blatantly unnatural act. The most obvious unnatural trait is in chemical contraception, which involves medicating a healthy person, an act we should recognize as not treating an illness, but altering our body, our organism itself, in truly powerful ways. It shows no respect for nature to medicate healthy people, to radically change the functioning of their bodies. Healthy women are fertile. Unhealthy ones become infertile. In order then to practice chemical contraception, we have to totally disregard the norms of health. We have to do what is inane and nonsensical according to common sense. More broadly, all contraception, chemical or otherwise, is unnatural in the sense that it perverts the conjugal act. Natural law tells us that the conjugal act is designed to produce children. Contraception takes it totally away from that purpose, perverting it into a mere pleasure purpose. It may be true that the conjugal act naturally contains some pleasure, but this is observably not its purpose. And in using contraception, we splice between pleasure and procreation, as unnatural a division as anyone could make. If we respect natural law and biblical principles on top of that, we would never use these horrible drugs and devices. Contraception seems to be the first major step along the slippery slope I am speaking of, which is a falling away from a respect for natural design. The next steps, taken by the little messiahs of the Church, along with most of society, are a veritable history of the 20th century. The Church, for instance, has in part or in whole absorbed feminism. This in itself is a rebellion against nature. Feminism involves demanding that women, despite their natural design, tendencies, strengths, and weaknesses, should more or less take on the roles and behaviors of men. This is blatantly unnatural, especially in areas that involve taking the woman away from rearing children or in putting her in certain kinds of work. Not only is woman's role with children biblical, but it is also natural. By nature she bears the children. And when I say bear, I do not only mean carry. She is also more disposed towards caring for them and rearing them. Likewise, because of her bearing children, as well as her lowered strength and aggression, it is unnatural to send her into heavy labor, dangerous work, and combat. Assuming we respect women for their role with children, we would never intend to encourage that behavior. We would in fact be repulsed by the idea. It is only in disrespecting her maternal role that we can see her in those roles without disgust or revolt. Feminism, on multiple levels, disregards natural law. Next, though more accepted by the culture than by the Church, homosexuality and transsexuality are a significant step in our slide against nature. I realize the reasons are very obvious, but I still want to state them. Number one, sodomy, the pairing of men with men and women with women, or the physical act itself, is almost the definition of unnatural. It uses the organism not just for what it was not designed to do, but in fact against what it was designed to do. The latter is one of the major reasons male homosexuality is so ripe with illnesses, including deadly ones. It is counternatural. Yet transsexualism takes man's revolt against nature to the next step. It doesn't just say, I desire to do what is unnatural, but rather says, I desire to be something which I am not. In doing so, it demands first chemically medicating a healthy person to produce radical change, and later mutilating the flesh to create the appearance of a new person. Now, like most believers, I don't actually think a chemical injection and an operation makes a man into a woman or vice versa. I merely view it as drugging and mutilating a normal and healthy person. Yet the intent of the act is indeed to change into another organism, and indeed radical change is involved. If we respect that God has made us man and woman, we would never think to do this act. It takes a very different world view, one which disrespects how we are made naturally. This brings me full circle to what I began with. We are on a slippery slope now, brothers, and it is not merely one of moral depravity. Rather, as I have demonstrated, it is one of rebellion against nature. Seen in this light, viewed as it rises and increases to the present, the next step isn't that hard to see. Because the next step is not a culture which accepts pedophilia, or a culture which accepts polygamy. It is in truth a culture which accepts a blending of human nature with the non-human. That means crossing man with animal, crossing man with machine. Just as men and women want to exchange roles, just as men and women want to exchange bodies, it would not be surprising to see humanity wanting to exchange its human identity. Imagine some young woman on the news demanding to have a pouch, just like a kangaroo has a pouch, and being accepted for it and accommodated by society for it. It would not be surprising either to see a man demanding his right to genetically cross with a lizard. Moreover, how many people would love to be turned overnight into the centaurs of legend, half man and half horse, and who knows what else? If we can reject our fertility and health, if we can reject our identities as men and women, why not our species as well? This blending could easily leave us not recognizably human, and as a natural consequence, not necessarily in fellowship with God or recognizing the relevance of Messiah to us. We would just be a different creature. Brothers, I don't intend to offer a solution for this future slide. I do want to suggest how we all ought to be living despite that reality. Right now, tomorrow, any time really. The way we should be living hasn't changed at all in thousands of years, so I don't have any novelties for you. It does not involve reacting or trying to stop the next tragic step of decline, or choosing the best political party. It only involves standing with the truth. I ask all believers, then, to stand with the teaching which has been with us from the beginning, which is a respect for natural law and a life guided by faithfulness to our Lord and Savior. Please respect your human fertility and do not destroy it. Fertility is good, normal, and healthy, and God uses it for set-apart purposes. Please respect the roles God and nature have given to man and woman as well. Do not disregard them, or for that matter disrespect them. They are good, natural, important, and holy. Instead of seeing what we can do to stop the next horrendous step down the slippery slope, let's just stand with the truth we have always known, even though it can be so hard to hear in these days. Respect God and respect nature. Let us enter the future standing with the timeless past, and standing with the truths from our God, which are in essence eternal. Thank you for listening. Chesed lachem.